Hey y'all, welcome to an episode of I don't know how to make up something witty with PBR and Kalashnikovs, like Coors and Kalashnikovs, or coffee and Comblocks, or nothing like that. AMDs and PBRs is the closest I can think of. But anyway, we're drinking shitties. Oh, I love me a shitty. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a couple things, primarily head spacing Kalashnikovs. So what is head spacing? Head spacing is basically the distance between a closed bolt breech face and the chamber of which the round sits in and enters the chamber. That's not the exact definition. I'm not very good with that kind of stuff, but the long and short of it is essentially the minimum and maximum acceptable allowed tolerances for letting a round be in your chamber of your gun. So when your round's chambered and your gun isn't headspaced properly, you have a possibility of a detonation of your entire firearm, which is not good to have happen. I would not recommend it. Haven't had it happen, thank goodness. So I got this AMD 65 off of somebody on the internet. Paid a pretty penny for it. Not too expensive, but not cheap either. It was told to me that this gun was built by JMac Customs, and there's a couple of things that make me think that it wasn't. But JMac Customs no longer builds rifles, so this could have been, a one-off rifle from years ago that they did, and I don't know enough about Kalashnikov history to know whether or not JMac Customs even built rifles. So I'm taking the guy's word on it when I purchased this. And it came with, this is a Hungarian AMD 65 for anybody who doesn't know, side folding stock, pistol grip's the same as the foregrip. I've got a Surefire flashlight on it that I got from mounted on a Mark 65 mount that I found on the internet. So far it's held up pretty good. It came as a surplus kit with a surplus Hungarian bolt right here, okay? When it came with this bolt, since I've been wanting to get more into building Kalashnikovs and I'm working on buying tool sets for myself to be able to tool up and actually build, I went and got myself a set of headspace gauges. So headspace gauges are measured out to be the minimum and maximum acceptable tolerances for chambering a round in your firearm. So this one's for 7.62x39, made by Manson Precision Reamers, December of 2023. This is a go gauge. So what should happen when I put this go gauge in the chamber, I don't know if you can see it, it's right there sticking out, okay, is I should be able to take my bolt. If I put it in the right way, that would help. Take my bolt, put it against the no gauge, twist it, and it'll close. That's pretty good. Once you take your bolt out, pop your gauge back out. Now, this is a no-go gauge. A no-go gauge is the minimum acceptable tolerance for a Kalashnikov. What I mean by that is, if this bolt does not close on a no-go gauge, that's what you want. That means that it is within an acceptable spec for being headspaced. So, take my bolt once again, orient it. It's on the gauge. Oh, it closes. Well, it's not supposed to do that. Is this rifle dangerous? Well, that is what our field gauge here is supposed to tell us. The field gauge is the maximum acceptable tolerance for having a round chambered in your Kalashnikov. So, if your bolt closes on a field gauge, that's bad, and that gun could explode the next time you fire it. So let's see. We got it ready, and no, it doesn't quite close on a field gauge, which means that the tolerances here are still kind of acceptable, but if we're using simple terms, your go gauge is your green light, your no-go gauge is your yellow light, and your field gauge is your red light, turn around, back up, don't do this. Bad idea. I was looking at videos on the internet of Kalashnikov, checking forums, trying to figure out what I can do since I don't have the proper tools to set the headspace for this rifle. And I thought of an idea. I thought, what if I took a different bolt from a different Kalashnikov and put it in my gun? Well, that won't work, is what the internet says. The internet says that Kalashnikov bolt carriers are interchangeable. However, Kalashnikov bolts are not interchangeable because the headspace needs to be set on them. So I thought to myself, I'm defeated. That's not good at all. But then I thought about it for a minute. And I thought to myself, okay, what's to stop me from gauging my spare bolt? What's to stop me from checking? Maybe it's in spec. So I got a couple of surplus AK kits from a good friend of mine, the Official Scorpion. It's my homie. Speaking of which, we met a couple of years ago, and he posted a great picture on Instagram about it. But he and I both love AKs, and so he sold me some AK parts, and included was an extra Hungarian bolt, and this, I think he said it's a Bulgarian bolt, but I don't know how to identify that kind of stuff yet. I'm still learning. Anyway, I tried the extra Hungarian bolt that he gave me. Same thing. Closed on a go, which is good. Closed on a no-go, which is bad. Past field gauge. I'm like, okay, so it's still acceptable, but let me just try it with this Bulgarian. So what did I do? Took my Bulgarian bolt. First, I should get a space gauge. How about, let's try a go gauge. Okay. Go gauge. Bolt goes in. And it doesn't quite close. It doesn't quite close, and I can't really pinch it with my finger. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And I looked on a couple of forums online. I'm like, hey, my gun won't close on a go gauge. And some of the advice that I got was put your bolt in your carrier. Put your go gauge in the chamber. Assemble your bolt. Get it to this point right here where it is about to close, and just put a little bit of pressure on it. Oh, look at that. It closed. So this rifle just passed the go gauge test with a Bulgarian bolt. Okay, that's interesting. A little bit of pressure, not much. Takes it right back out. Let's pop that back out. Get my go gauge out. How about a no-go gauge? Let's try that. Put the no-go gauge in the chamber. Now with the no-go gauge, no amount of pressure should be able to close this bolt on that gauge. See how it's not closing? And I'm putting force into that. I can sit here and beat on it. It's not gonna close. Which means that this rifle has tight tolerances and passes headspace, which are two good things to have for the longevity of the gun. So, if it passes a go gauge and it fails, or excuse me, if it passes a go gauge and it passes the no-go gauge test where it does not close on a no-go gauge, that means it's definitely not going to close on the field gauge, because the field gauge is only a couple of thousandths more expanded than the no-go gauge. So what does that mean? That means that I am taking this surplus Bulgarian bolt given to me by a friend, and I'm putting it in a Hungarian AK, and I'm going to run it, and I'm going to see if it works. Because for the longest time on all the forums that I checked, everybody said you can't interchange Kalashnikov bolts because they need to be headspaced, and it's got to be specific. Well, if this passes headspace, based off of my gauges, which are pretty much brand new. I mean, they say they were made in 2023, but I got them, I don't know, 6 months ago. If it passes the gauge test, it should be good to go, in all theory. And this was more or less confirmed by a Reddit post that I made about a week and a half ago. A bunch of people were like, oh, you can't do that. And I said, but it passed the gauges. And eventually one wonderful commenter was like, bro, if it passes the gauges, send it. That means it's good to go. Like, your rifle's fine. I thought, okay, there it is. So, this is my AMD 65 with a Bulgarian bolt in it, passing the headspace gauges. I'm going to recheck again after a couple hundred rounds to confirm that it's good to go. And this is the second rifle in my lineup to go to the regular guy training class that's coming up in March. I don't know which one I want to take, whether it's going to be this one or my Yugo M70 AB2, the underfolder. I'm more inclined to lean towards this one because this rifle is insanely light. This is a lightweight fighting Kalashnikov. With the muzzle brake on the end of it here, it's also insanely light recoiling, even with a wire stock. I was shooting this a couple weeks ago, and it was just fine. Like, I felt no recoil. It's not, it might even be overgassed, but I can't tell because of the muzzle brake. So, let me know what you guys think, which rifle I should take. I'll keep an update coming along with this rifle as far as how the head spacing situation goes for it, and keep you guys posted. This video is probably going to try to be on YouTube. I'm going to try to make it my first YouTube video because this information is not on YouTube. The only video that I was able to find on YouTube was a guy talking about Wassers from the assault weapons ban era that were converted from single stacks to double stacks. And he was saying, oh, you shouldn't swap bolts on a Wasser because the single stack bolts are different than the double stack bolts and da-da-da. Well, this isn't a Wasser that was a single stack converted to a double. This is a surplus kit brought into the country and built by a reputable manufacturer. In addition, I just didn't find that video very relevant to our modern day because it was made, I think, 10 years ago, if my timestamp was correct in my head. So, this is what we got. Thanks for checking it out, and I will catch you folks next time.